Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, Patriots, and welcome to the 52nd audio file in the audiocast series known as the Q News Patriot. I'm the Q News Patriot. My name is SG Anon. It is phenomenal to be back with you, although I am running a few days behind my initial goals. It's been about 2.5, 3 weeks since we've been on air in this format together. Have had the pleasure in that period of time of getting to get my feet back in the water as far as getting out of the house. I got to meet many of you recently at an event in South Dakota. Very wonderful event and a lot of really good, devout, just we the people patriots there. And what a high flying environment that was. And so I want to thank all of you for that. It was absolutely wonderful. But it did take a little bit of a toll. We pushed it a little bit far, and that's okay. Came back here and have been resting in recovery and dealing with the little one solo as my wife has been working and keeping up things at the house. And I've been sort of getting back into full-time work electronically. It's been a fun time. But that being said, a lot has happened in the last 2.5 to 3 weeks, hasn't it? We have a tremendous amount of, I think, directional confirmation to a lot of the awakened patriots and anons out there, knowing that, along this entire journey, we're doing things by the book, which means we're outlining the scaffolding and the infrastructure. And we are sort of gearing up to revert our world back to see that military justice that we all have anticipated so deliciously over these last months and really moving into years at this point. We're witnessing the banking system continuing to crumble. We're witnessing military operations in all theaters. We're witnessing the information mis and dis information, especially war being turned up, the cyber attacks being turned up. As a matter of fact, just recently on TruthSocial, we outed a couple of federal actors. Not sure who they were, not sure where the accounts came from. One of them has since terminated their account on TruthSocial, both of them using the all-seeing eye. So these people really can't help themselves, right? They have to put it out there. It's part of their karmic return. It's part of the homage that they pay every time they commit an act, every time they move forward with an action. And we're seeing a lot of that on our side as well. So anyway, before we get too far into things, I really want to take a moment and do a little bit of housekeeping. First off, the background today says the 6-month 10th day. That is incorrect. It is the 6th month and the 12th day, 2 days later, 48 hours delayed from when I was really planning on getting this thing out and about and ready to go. I had some editing issues, and then the little one solo over these last few days has been quite a fun time. But that's really what it's all about, right? At the end of the day, making sure that the next generation is appropriately cared for and guided and trained up in the ways that they should go, right? So that we can keep the world, change it back to what it was always supposed to be, and then keep it that way, right? We're on this mission for our children primarily and our grandchildren, our families, etc. So that being said, there's a lot that has happened in these last few weeks. We're going to try and break up today's file into a couple of different sections. We're going to talk a little bit about TruthSocial comms. We're going to talk a little bit about some Q drops. We're going to talk a little bit about geopolitical events. We're going to talk a little bit about information warfare, Tucker Carlson now on Twitter, the posts that Elon is highlighting and sharing recently, the posts that President Trump is highlighting and sharing recently, sort of having the same spirit about them. We're going to go over some alternative news, maybe is a good way to put it, non-mainstream news, but maybe not all of the way deep into the what we would call the Q Patriot area, that a non-focused area that a lot of you listen in on with that particular wavelength and lens, excuse me, good Lord, lens of understanding. But some very fascinating articles when we apply our greater knowledge of what's going on in the world. They're very fascinating and they make a lot of sense and help to paint a picture. And we're also going to talk about a little bit of housekeeping. So that being said, without further ado, let's get right to it. I'm going to get over here. Today's file will be a little bit more maybe old school. We're going to walk through some things together here on air. I will try to be as succinct and brief as I possibly can, but it is worth noting that we have a number of signals being given off by individuals that sort of align behind the same things. This coalescence of message is becoming, is sort of getting into the fray right now, coming into the public space, the public scene. It's doing so in an extremely gentle way. It's actually brilliant if you want to consider it from a counterintelligence operation point of view, seeding the narrative, letting it rest, providing lots of basis and evidentiary fact, letting it rest, seeding the narrative again over a period of weeks and sometimes months to drive the public understanding to a particular point. We're witnessing that right now, and it's absolutely devastatingly effective as we watch the message between Russia, the message concerning Russia and Ukraine, the Clinton Foundation, the DNC, James Comey, the FBI, the corruption of Biden as it pertains to all of that, the corruption of the Clintons as it pertains to all of that. You know, these sorts of things are coming together, and not just in the alternative space, not just in the fringe media content, not just on forum boards late at night or in, TruthSocial conversations that could go very, very deep, right, with a lot of what we would call salacious and very damning content. But it is going mainstream in the sense that the public, the vast majority of conservative America, we the people, the patriots out there everywhere across all political lines, across all divisional boundaries, are sort of able to digest it from where we're at. It is sort of like a gift being presented, packaged up in the correct way for as many people as possible, right? Nothing too specific, nothing too over the top, just enough to get people into the hole, just enough to get people to break that brainwashing and that controlled programming. And it's a very effective tactic that we've seen. So as we go through here, we're going to cover a couple of things from the president's TruthSocial, but I wanted to open up here with this particular, see here. So if we come over here, we have Kash Patel's TruthSocial account. And Kash is a name to remember, told to us by Q. Kash has actually gone on TruthSocial and shared the TruthSocial Q account to his own personal profile, and the same has happened in the reverse of that. So that's very interesting. On June the 5th at 1:44 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, June the 5th, 2023, so 1 week ago today, Kash put up Night Shift, huge YUGE, week coming, highlighting the Y over the H, right? Additionally, Kash shared on his profile just a few days ago a post by Real Roger Stone. I will interview Real Donald Trump in the debut of my new show on WABC Radio today, Sunday, June 11th. So that would have been yesterday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be his first interview since indicted, and it will be huge, YUGE. Listen live at 7:70 a.m. on the dial. So there's a 77 right there on the dial, or at WABCradio.com, or on the app at Team Trump. So Kash shared this out, and we know that over the last many days, we've seen some of the topics that we've discussed in previous files coming out into the public limelight. We talked about conspiracy charges coming. We talked about obstruction charges coming. We talked about, setting the precedent, right? We have to set the precedents. One of the reasons that they're bringing in the Espionage Act and all of these other ridiculous sort of highly overpowered statutes to really malign what is at its core a Presidential Records Act. But at the same time, what we're highlighting across all of these different actions of this Department of Injustice that we've seen is we're seeing all of the legal protection, sort of the unofficial gentleman's courtesy that has been extended to the executive branch, individuals in the executive branch of government, all the way down from the president to staffers and aides and things like that. Certain just courteous understandings, we're seeing those dropped by the wayside. We're seeing the gloves pulled off. We're seeing the really what amounts to what will become, I should say, equal application of the law, because we haven't had that. We've never had that. This elected class has always protected themselves. They have always ensured that application of the law was a me versus thee sort of positioning based on their influence in positions of power, money, control, finance, things like that, that we've talked about many, many times on this program. So it's fascinating that we have these posts being shared, and both of them point to this misspelling of huge, of the word huge with Y. So I came over here to the Q boards and put Y in a bracket, and it brought up only 5 different posts. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. One of those posts, let me see here, where's it at? There we go. One of those posts was from December the 7th of 2018, 11:21 and 52 seconds. Interesting music for Fox News. Sound familiar? Why all of a sudden are people talking about the Clinton Foundation, including whistleblowers and hidden company established to investigate covertly, example, ABC agencies? Would you go public if the investigation was still ongoing? What happens when you have enough evidence to proceed? What is the benefit of educating the public prior to proceeding? And then it highlights the word Comey with that Y in brackets. So it's also worth highlighting that Y is sort of a symbol that's interchanged with the satanic Luciferian symbol of the owl. And it's worth highlighting that the owl is a symbol in many different cultures, but it is known to be an occultic symbol as well. It's known to be a representative message for sort of like we watch you in the night, right? So that's very fascinating that we should highlight this. Another post, post 2510 from November the 30th of 2018. Says edit Q post timestamp regarding D class prior to and post testimony. Comey timestamps regarding attorney challenge to subpoena and do the math. So that's absolutely fascinating to me. And then one final post that I thought was worth exploring with this spread of this particular message here is post 3599 from November the 16th of 2019. And that post states the harvest crop has been prepared and soon will be delivered to the public for consumption. A higher loyalty. Why? Hunters in brackets. Hunters become the hunted. Treason. Sedition. How do you remove a liability? 6 o'clock can be dangerous. Family proud. I don't get into too much speculation on the particular ins and outs of that particular drop, but I will say that it's fascinating. We're talking about removing a liability, family proud. The Clinton crime family is known for suicides, Arkancides, Clintoncides, whatever you want to call it. The Biden crime family known for sort of the same thing. Obama has been linked directly to the same thing with the downing of the flight of that lady 7 days after she came to the White House to discuss, essentially to have President Obama look into what really happened on 9/11, because she had lost family in that event and had worked out that it could not have been the official story. She died 7 days later in a plane crash with tickets that Hussein Obama had given to her for that particular aircraft flight. So whatever we're highlighting here, we're talking about the deep state crime, the crime families, right? We're talking about the deep state group. We're talking about the wheat that we're trying to get chopped up for the public so that they can digest it. We're going through this D-class operation because of these people, because of these rings, because of this dark underbelly of society that has existed in such a maligning way that it almost sort of defies comprehension. And so it's very fascinating that we would see these symbols called to our attention and directly concerning Clinton, Comey, the FBI, the same things right now that are being discussed with regards to the Trump indictment, which we saw coming, right? And we sort of did a little bit of backwards logic, if you will, some hypothetical extending into the future, just logical analysis. And we arrived at the conclusion in one of our files that we would have something like this occur because of precedent. And so if it's going to occur because of precedent, we also have to remember why it's really occurring. It's occurring so that we can take these statutes, precedents, these original moments that we set up, take them directly to our enemy and leverage them against our enemy using the full force of not just the United States military, but the United States legal system, the rule of law itself. It's one of the things that we have to bring back, and we have to purge of that malevolence, and we have to really purify it and bring it back to what it was supposed to have always been. So I found that absolutely fascinating. I thought all of you would find that fascinating as well. If we come over here, there's a couple of other things from Commander-in-Chief that I think are worth exploring. So on June the 12th, today at 11:40 a.m., 11.4 Eastern date time, we have a post. It's actually a two-part post. Let's go ahead and read the first post as it pertains to this. It'll make a little bit more sense. All right, so beginning 11:24, 16 minutes prior. I hope the entire country is watching what the radical left lunatics are doing to America and all we stand for. Excuse me. We are a nation in serious decline, and it will only get worse. P.S. China just effectively took over Cuba. Would never have happened under the Trump administration. If anyone listening to this particular program is old enough to remember the Bay of Pigs and the fiasco that came as a result of the Cuban Missile Crisis and the destabilization that occurred within the U.S. government, that was very nearly an EAS type moment, right? So we're sort of seeing history repeating itself, except this time the deep state Kabbalist enemy is not the Soviet Union Bolshevik Party. The deep state Kabbalist enemy this time, the extension of the Luciferian cabal, is the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. But sort of the same historical pattern. I thought that was fascinating. If we come over here to the next truth that he put out 16 minutes later, now that the seal, in quotes, is broken, in addition to closing the border and removing all of the criminal, in quotes, elements that have illegally invaded our country, making America energy independent and even dominant again, and immediately ending the war between Russia and Ukraine, I will appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the USA, Joe Biden, the entire Biden crime family, and all others involved with the destruction of our elections, borders, and country itself. That is a very clear message. We will use every asset at our disposal. We will do it by the rule of law via a special prosecutor, which is in brackets. And we will ensure that everyone involved in our in the treason, sedition, the destruction of our country is brought down and handled appropriately. So I saw this, and I did a few decodes as it pertained to the Q boards, but nothing really struck me as fascinating. You know, we can talk about the seal being broken. Navy SEALs possibly seal being broken is also sort of the initiation of an agreement, right? Once we have the signature, we have the handshake, those sorts of things. Once we break the seal and open the agreement up, it can be the initiation of something like that. Criminal elements, you know, again, it didn't bring me to anything in particular along the Q boards, but I thought to myself, we have all of this emphasis pointed at the idea of a real prosecutor, and he names off most corrupt president in the history of the country, the entire crime family, and all others involved with the destruction of our elections, borders, and country itself. So this is a significant announcement being made here. And then it's worth highlighting on the president's TruthSocial, just a couple of hours later at 12:49 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so just not quite 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we have POTUS put up election interference, all capitals, at a level never seen before in our country. So we're sort of building this all up. We're talking about interference. We're talking about corruption. We're talking about criminal elements that have illegally invaded our country. That does not have to be, and I firmly believe that POTUS is not just referring to the border and things that have happened in the last few years. I think in some respects, we're obviously talking about the American deep state apparatus, even right down to the very community-based level, right? And so I came over here and I put into the search bar special prosecutor military. And one of the interesting things that came up was an article that came out just last year, actually, where it says U.S. Army establishes independent prosecutorial office. Let's go through here. Again, this bill is this article is 11 months old. It comes from armytimes.com. As required by the annual defense bill for 2022, the U.S. Army officially established an independent prosecutor's office, reporting to Army Secretary Christine Wormuth, according to a general order. The article goes on to talk about the application to improving the sexual harassment and assault response and prevention program in the Army. We go through here. The mandated reforms come 2 months after a government watchdog called out the policy. The current policy is disjointed and unclear. Long promised centralized guidance were still missing 2 years after the Fort Hood independent review and the Defense Department's independent review on sexual assault. What's changing and when? By September of 2023, the Office of Special Trial Counsel will handle prosecution decisions and trial work for several major crimes, removing those decisions from commanders throughout the force. So that sounds to me like a delegation avenue, right? Like we're trying to free time up. We're trying to free things up at the bureaucratic level, which would be necessary if we were going to militarily process mass amounts of convictions, mass amounts of data, evidence, things like that being entered into public record through some sort of worldwide tribunal, which is what a lot of us have come to expect and really hope for. And I think in a lot of ways we know it has to come, but it may not come in the exact form we're thinking here as we listen to these broadcasts like this right now. But what's fascinating is the type of crimes that will be prosecuted by this new office. In other words, the oversight being given by this new office to specific capital crimes. It's not just sexual assault. It's really actually quite intense. So the crimes that this new office will oversee, and it will be headed by a general officer from the service's Uniformed Lawyer Corps, who reports directly to the Army Secretary, are murder, manslaughter, rape, sexual assault, child sex crimes, including child pornography, wrongful broadcasting of intimate imagery, sexual misconduct in general, kidnapping, domestic violence, stalking, and retaliation. And you could even say that retaliation could be to preserve whistleblower integrity, right? To sort of force transparency within the overall force. It's absolutely incredible that this office was established around about the same time that Space Force began the consolidative process for all military communications. I personally find it quite astounding, actually. And so as we've got this streamlining going on, we are clearly seeing the U.S. military preparing itself for large-scale what I would call massive large-scale operations to dole out justice, to oversee justice, both within the military, things that have happened within the military, within the fighting force, and then with, as it pertains to enemy combatants and prisoners of war and things like that during wartime, which of course is handled by the war crimes tribunals. So, sort of tying right along with that and that overall understanding, we come over here to President Trump's TruthSocial. And on June the 9th, 2023, at 7:25 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the president put up a 1 minute exactly video that focuses a lot on the deep state, the corruption, the radical leftists, but it has the theme of the gray wolf all through the video. The gray wolf is also known as the timber wolf for many of you out there unfamiliar. I came over here to the cue boards and I put in wolf just in the actual search bar, and it brought up 3 separate drops. 2 of them I think are completely unrelated because it pulled the term from URLs. But what was fascinating is drop 2522 from December the 1st of 2018 at 12:31 and 55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this would have been 12:30 in the morning. We have a post from a Twitter account that has been suspended during the digital warfare process regarding GHWB USSS, so George Herbert Walker Bush, Secret Service code name, Timberwolf. The gray wolf, Canis lupus, also known as Timberwolf, shares a common ancestry with the domestic dog. State funeral next week. Coincidence? So I think it's very fascinating that we're talking about sort of foreign and domestic, right, in this particular context. And we've all done a lot of homework into the Bush family. We know the Bush family's ties to the British Crown. We know we go through Prescott Bush, and we have very interesting ties to the Nazi Party. There's just a lot that we can go back and dissect as it pertains to lineage, and that's not the purpose of our broadcast today. But it is worth highlighting that that's very important to understand how we sort of tie these different things together at the narrative level, right? We have to prepare the public for this information but we have to really understand the basis for the information, what the hidden information is right from the get-go, so that we can help guide the public as the learning process gets a little bit more intense. So what was really fascinating, at least to me, was just today, actually. Let me go over here. June the 12th at 6:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's a difference of, what is that, 12 hours and 50 minutes? Is that correct? So we had the initial one at 7:25 a.m. We had the second one at 6:35. So 7 to 7 would have been 12. So just a little bit less, than that, actually. It's about an 11 hours and a 10-minute delay, or 10-minute overture. I'd have to double back on the math. But what I find so interesting is that we have this 3 days apart, and we've got 50 minutes involved in there. So I came over here, I put in minus 50 into the Q drops, the Q boards. Let me see where it's at here. I have to go down and find it. It pulled up this drop that talks a lot about FISA and the overall corruption of the DOJ, which again sort of aligns with what we're dealing with right now. It's drop 1746. The truth was not revealed yet. FISA didn't have much impact, to be honest, or there is still something missing to it, which reveals the whole truth. That's a comment from an Anon. Q responds, FISA equals the start. FISA equals the immediate confirmation of illegal acts regarding the signers. FISA equals the immediate confirmation of start of Hussein's spy campaign to rig an election was based on false info. FISA implicates HRC. All right, there's the Clinton tie over again. D party as feeders of false info with the intent of securing MSM plus blast and insurance. FISA equals implicating senior members of the UK's MI5, MI6, SIS, US Intel, White House, Five Eyes, Republican Party, Congress, Senate, of known corruption in effort to retain power and rig election, plus safeguard events by political kill to act while in power, given MSM fake Russia narrative. FISA equals tying the MSM heads, TV behind Corp, to D party, other foreign heads of state, and co-op strategy. Now keep that in mind, foreign heads of state. We're going to talk about that in just a second. FISA brings down the House. FOIA does not include FISA. D-class by POTUS key parts that factually demonstrate the dirty, fake dossier was used as a primary source to secure highest level of intel spying on primary Republican opponent. Post-election, intel assets for domestic spying on the President of the United States for the office of the Presidency of the United States of America. Logical thinking, public awareness, FISA, spying, foundation built by Huber. No spelling errors intended, mobile, unknown if above. And Q goes on and shares and actually adds to that drop. No matter what happens, the media will not push the truth. MSM implicated in highest level treason event in U.S. modern day history. Refer back to previous drops. Witnessing highest level treason event unfold in U.S. worldwide modern day history. Have you ever witnessed so many Congress and Senate seats vacate in a short period of time? Have you ever witnessed so many CEO, BOD vacate events in a short period of time? Have you ever witnessed the DOJ and FBI, what is known, fire and release and then vacate events in a short period of time? Have you ever witnessed the vacating party, all positions, challenge, fight, and push for the removal of the entering duly elected POTUS? Have you ever witnessed a former U.S. president travel the world ahead and behind of the current, attempting to undo, threaten, hide, cover up previous, current, illegal, corrupt, evil events? Have you ever witnessed 40 to 50,000 sealed indictments, not all federal and criminal? Have you ever witnessed so many pedo child people go down? Child predators. Have you ever witnessed them this many go down? Have you ever witnessed a similar like group rise up, mimics Nazi Germany with similar like logo, push, etc.? So that would be Antifa, the LGBTQ plus movement, which is not to say those are the same thing. Just while we're on the topic, those are separate movements, but we sort of have the same influencing arm in both in both areas, right? The same money, the same backers, the same narrative push at the academic level, the same narrative push at the school level, the same narrative push by the higher institutions that we have, the professional institutions, the schools, things of that nature. Have you ever witnessed a DEFCON scare? Have you ever witnessed unauthorized missiles fired, photo evidence yet dismissed? Have you ever witnessed political foundations receive hundreds of millions of dollars from specific terrorist sponsor organizations only to immediately cease once out of power, all during the same period of time? Nothing is happening, not fast enough. Do you not understand or comprehend what we are currently dealing with? People are dying. We are under threat of kill every second of the day. Those who you trust the most are the most evil. This is not a game. Humanity is at stake. No spelling errors intended, mobile, unknown if above. So this is an incredible Q drop, right? This is absolutely incredible. And so tying that back to what we've got going on with, Kash Patel and with Roger Stone and POTUS just recently talking about Hillary's emails and President Trump just in the last few days retruthing that Mel Gibson was going to expose all of them about how child trafficking earns $34 billion a year, 3417 times two. We've got Julian Assange, who has all of the dirt on the Clintons, the Obamas, the Bushes. It's one of the reasons they went after him as the most wanted man in the world, right? He is now being extradited to the United States of America under the exact same act that they are attempting to bring President Trump's documents charges beneath, right? They're trying to go from presidential records to espionage, which is a completely different set of governing circumstances, right? And that applies to different matters of national security. And yet Assange and President Trump are now connected in that fashion. It's absolutely fascinating to me that Senator Grassley just today came out and said that executives over at the Ukrainian company, the energy company Burisma, that we know has been a center point in the corruption for the Bidens, for the Romneys, for the Pelosi's, for all of those individuals in Congress that are sort of known and have been linked to that by good open source journalism. He comes out and says that there are 17 audio recordings, 17, not 16, not 18, 17 audio recordings that have been retained as basically insurance against the Biden family. We are witnessing incredible things right now going on. We are absolutely witnessing messages being sent. We're going to keep going on this deciphering here really fast, and then we're going to move into some geopolitical events and some housekeeping. So in the last few days, it looks like in the last 4 to 5 days, President Trump also retruthed a post for a gentleman named DC Drano. I believe Rogan O'Hanley is his name, a great source for information worth following on TruthSocial if you're on there. And the post is, it's become clear our government has been corrupted and weaponized against conservative Americans. We don't want a traditional GOP president to go in and play nice. We need a human wrecking ball to obliterate the evil, infecting DC with fire and fury. I only know one guy that will do that. President Trump retruths that. It's absolutely fascinating to look at the things that President Trump shares. It's not so much in what's being said as in what's not being said. If we go down the profile a little bit to June the 8th, the day of the indictment, the day of the charges being brought by the corrupt special counsel at the Department of Injustice. This post states, I'm an innocent man. The Biden administration is totally corrupt. This is election interference and a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time. Make America great again. So it's a video from the president. It's sort of an overcap of everything that we have known thus far. But the man is coming out very much pleading with, the centrist, independent Americans, the ones who are what we could say maybe make up a big base in that conservative majority. He's basically trying to get them to understand that this is completely and totally corrupt. It's completely and totally a hoax. These people are not going to stop. There's really no way that we can get them to stop. We can lawfare them to death, but there's a lot of control, a lot of influence in the judiciary. There's a lot of influence in how these things are happening. It's being done at the behest of the current administration, which is sort of, if I can use the pun, it's sort of an indictment on the current administration and their mindset and their attitude, right? You don't have to jail a political opponent if you are a legitimate administration. And that's sort of a point that's being made here very publicly and very optically, in addition to the precedent setting that we've talked about. But what's absolutely fascinating is in the background of this picture, or of this video, instead of it being the nice sort of library look, that dark wood back office with the flags, behind President Trump in the video message format, this is taking place. This is being filmed in front of a painting representing the negotiation of the Roosevelt Corollary, which was an addition to the Monroe Doctrine. And so to sort of expand on what that is, we have to get into a little bit of history, but it's very significant, and I think it's very important that we talk about it. The Monroe Doctrine was sort of the manifest destiny, sea to shining sea attitude that was adopted by the U.S. government back in the early 19th century. Let me pull it up over here. All right, so I've pulled it up over here on the National Archives website. We know the National Archives is, again, one of those ABC agencies that's been infiltrated, but they do have an important job as it pertains to the information and consciousness war that we're all living. Here's what we have from them. The Monroe Doctrine from 1823 was articulated in the 7th Annual Message to Congress on December the 2nd of 1823. This was the 7th message given by President James Monroe. The European powers, according to Monroe, were obligated to respect the Western Hemisphere as the United States sphere of influence. So here's what we had going on. Understandably, the United States has always taken particular interest in its closest neighbors, the nations of the Western Hemisphere. Equally understandably, expressions of this concern have not always been favorably regarded by other American nations. This comes back to that whole fair and just, concept that we've discussed at different points in time, but the symbolism is important here. The Monroe Doctrine is the best known U.S. policy towards the Western Hemisphere, buried in an annual message delivered to Congress by President Monroe in December of 1823. The doctrine warns European nations that the United States will not tolerate further colonization or puppet monarchs. The doctrine was conceived to meet major concerns of the moment, but it soon became a watchword of U.S. policy in the Western Hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine was invoked in 1865 when the U.S. government exerted diplomatic and military pressure in support of the Mexican president Benito Juarez. This support enabled Juarez to lead a successful revolt against the Emperor Maximilian, who had been placed on the throne by the British government. Almost 40 years later, in 1904, European creditors of a number of Latin American countries threatened armed intervention to collect their debts. President Theodore Roosevelt, promptly proclaimed the right of the United States to exercise international police power to curb such chronic wrongdoing in his so-called Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. While the doctrine's message was designed to keep European powers out of the Western Hemisphere, Roosevelt strengthened its meaning to justify sending the United States into other countries of the Western Hemisphere. As a result, U.S. Marines were sent into Santo Domingo in 1904, Nicaragua in 1911, and Haiti in 1915, ostensibly to keep the Europeans out. Other Latin American nations viewed the interventions with misgivings, and relations between the great colossus of the North and its southern neighbors remained strained for many years. In 1962, the Monroe Doctrine was invoked symbolically when the Soviet Union began to build missile launching sites in Cuba. What is China doing right now? Building a spy base in Cuba. The Biden administration has admitted such, and the president on TruthSocial, President Trump, has brought that to attention at least twice now. With the support of the Organization of American States, President John F. Kennedy threw a naval and air quarantine around the island. After several tense days, the Soviet Union agreed to withdraw the missiles and dismantle the sites. Subsequently, the United States dismantled several of its own obsolete air and missile bases in Turkey. I believe that we are being prepared for some sort of event as it pertains to Cuba and foreign interference in the business of the United States and the businesses of the United States. And what is EO 13848? Imposing certain sanctions in the event of foreign interference in a United States election. We are being given the guide map. We are being given a rough blueprint of things that are occurring, have already occurred actually, in real time, things that we can sort of expect to play out right? Because in some regards, this is a back and forth. In some regards, this is a cinematic production. We know President Trump has talked about central casting. Castle Rock has been brought up several different times. We can look on different Fox News interviews with Peter Doocy and other reporters, and the White House in the background is very obviously not the DC White House, so that we know that a lot of what we're living isn't exactly what we think it is. But we also know that there are kinetic, real lives at stake, that there are real operations taking place, that there is a very coordinated effort to drain the deep state swamp, not just from within the United States borders, but all around the world. If we can drain them all together, we will never have to deal with them again. Think about that. If we can drain the swamp all together as one, we the people around the world, and get them completely disempowered, dispense justice, cover all of our bases, take every single one of them out, purge our communities, right? If we can do all of that, we will never have to deal with this again. We will be able to create a world that's balanced and safe. We'll be able to create a world that's sensible based on common understandings, right? Not all of our understandings are going to agree, but the commonalities, the big themes of humankind, the big absolutions that we know to be true, we can achieve those together relatively easily without this, sort of apparatus that exists in the world and has existed for a very long time. And just if you were doubting that we were being successful, I have gone over here and I found a couple of interesting articles. So it is worth noting that you can't always trust the things that come out of articles, even the alternative articles. You always have to double check the sourcing and the funding. I always try to do that. But what was fascinating to me is that on June the 11th of 2023, an article was published online in the financial sector that said $133.1 billion enters U.S. banking system in 2 weeks as deposit panic witnesses abrupt U-turn. Now, that's the reason given, right? The article starts off with the mass flight of capital out of the banking system is witnessing an abrupt reversal. In the last 2 weeks, depositors have added $133 billion to American bank accounts as panic over the safety of the system subsides. In the last week alone, customers piled $47 billion into U.S. banks, according to data from the Federal Reserve Economic Data System. Isn't this fascinating? It's almost like we're draining the coffers and it gets to such a point that it's a critical mass, and then the other side is forced to inject more into the system to keep it afloat. They're paling out more water, right? They're having to get a bigger bucket to get more water out of the system. It's crumbling, right? They have to inflate it. They have to get more into it. It is extremely unlikely that 46.5 billion, actually 46.6 billion dollars into U.S. bank accounts over the last 7 days came organically from the overall mass population, the working population. That's extremely unlikely. We are the majority. Many of you out there have made the decision at different points along the way to keep only what's necessary in the bank, or to control what is in your bank account to the greatest degree possible. In other words, what comes in, what goes out, why it comes in and goes out, etc. So seeing that number come in the last week, and then in the last 2 weeks, we're jumping that number all of the way up to 130 billion, 133 billion, which is a nearly 90 billion increase on top of that. What we're seeing is big money fighting back. We're seeing the deep state being forced again to pull the money out from underneath their mattress, to get the money out from the safe box that they keep under the pillow. Where do you hide it? Well, let's draw it all out. Let's find out. Let's bring it into the open, right? So we're witnessing an incredible victory in very big ways on all sectors and all fronts. Excuse me. Sort of closing things off, we're going to talk a little bit about Tucker and Twitter and Russia and China, and we will close off our file. It's been a long file today. We've had a lot to talk about. We'll close off at the end of the file with a little bit of housekeeping, but Russia and China have begun stepping up naval activity even more so in the Pacific region. We are witnessing Chinese ships sort of saber rattling with ships from the U.S. Navy. We are witnessing Russian submarines being tied to different theaters and areas of operation, still being talked about by certain military correspondent papers as not all being accounted for. In other words, where are they? We don't know. there's very good evidence to show that the Russian Navy is running some sort of special or dark operation in the Atlantic Basin and the Caribbean Basin, the Caribbean Sea area. We're seeing some Twitter accounts come from different, different countries in those areas of the world, the Azore Islands, for example, and others that talk about having seen odd ships or, Russian soldiers or flags or things like that. China, same sort of thing through the Middle East. As a matter of fact, just recently we had the Chinese just a few weeks ago actually talking about, or excuse me, hosting and talking about economic policy with what I call the Stan countries: Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, all these different nations, right? So, and we know that the Chinese are actively brokering peace agreements and military arms agreements in the Middle East and in Africa, interestingly enough, moving into Egypt and that sort of northern Saharan Africa, those areas of the world, those nations in that area of the world. So we're witnessing this coordinated operation continuing. The Turkish president recently won re-election, right, about 13 days ago. That is sort of the return of the Ottoman Empire in some respects. I think we can sort of chalk that up to witnessing a dismantling of NATO, primarily starting from Turkey and from some different NATO nations that will have cold feet as it pertains to the bear. And what's fascinating is just recently, as a matter of fact, I think it was today. Let me get on here and double check. Oh goodness, where's it at? All right, yes, it was today. An article from Israel 24 News. The flag of the Russian mercenary Wagner group was raised in Tel Aviv. A flag representing the Russian mercenary Wagner group arose on a crane in Tel Aviv, Israel today. That is absolutely fascinating. And then also in the last few days, sort of tying back into these military operations, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission gives states more flexibility in updating their emergency alert plans and monitoring radio. Let's go through here. From the article dated June 7th, with more radio stations relying on fewer in-person staff, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau is recommending state emergency communication committees begin working with new emergency alert sources that they can reach immediately when they no longer receive an old source reliably without waiting for formal approval. The decision to give states more leeway is designed to ensure the EAS system is consistently functioning during emergencies. For purposes of expediting approval, so they're fast-tracking this plan, the Bureau recommends that state officials configure their monitoring assignments by assigning as many participants as possible to directly monitor with no intermediate links, one or more sources that receive the national emergency message directly from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which we know is involved in continuity of government. FEMA has designated 77 broadcast radio stations, isn't that interesting, that collectively serve 90% of the nation's population, as well as 3 satellite networks, each covering virtually the entire continental U.S. to play this role. This is a massive restructuring and a reallocation of, or I guess a reallocation is not the right word, a streamlining of existing allocated assets. This is a very broad change that's being implemented in the way the emergency alert is handled at the state level by all of the independent territories, independent states and territories, the sovereign ones, right, within the Union of the United States. So it's absolutely amazing then that at the same time all of this is going on, we have Tucker on Twitter talking about other sentient beings, UFOs, and telling more than 120 million people at this point that the U.S. government is hiding things from them. UFOs are real. These are actual words that he used. UFOs are real, and so is extraterrestrial life. Coming from an independent, a now independent, I should say, journalist like Tucker Carlson with a reputation that precedes him for integrity, for capability, for honesty, right? Now we as Anons know that there's some hush money that's been paid, that any individuals that accepted the money in the Matrix, they're worthy to be questioned, right? All of this has to be taken into account. But when we consider the consciousness war that we're in, the information disinformation war that we're fighting and the attempt to reach the greatest majority of humanity in the least possible time, in the least amount of time possible, we have to consider that utilizing individuals like Tucker who have reach, clout, who have some semblance of honesty as it pertains to real news, who have some semblance of integrity when presented with sort of the understanding of things and how things are about to go in the wayside in the world. I think that's very important. Interestingly enough, and just as promised, we are now seeing through Tucker, beginning with Tucker, but also with President Trump highlighting Mel Gibson, The Sound of Freedom coming out on July the 4th, and Elon drawing attention to things like the White Rabbit over the last 6 months, discussing free information, the free flow of speech, just recently highlighting those things on Twitter. It is absolutely fascinating to me that we are starting to see the organized government pedophilia, the big tech pedophilia, the protection of the pedophile class, right? That's really what this boils down to, the normalization of a very sexually deviant, anti-God, anti-child, sort of anti-human way of life, right? We're watching that being exposed now in real time. And it was discussed heavily as it pertains to Instagram on Tucker's episode 2, and a number of other outlets picked that up as well and shared through that. I believe it was the Wall Street Journal that initially did the article referring to the terminology on Instagram, that the hash codes, the hashtag codes that would connect really victims to abusers is really what it was about. And it's fascinating that pizza and map and other words like this were used not only on Instagram, sort of confirming Pizzagate, but also used in emails that we have through WikiLeaks that were sent to John Podesta. So we are witnessing the tie-in of the child sex trafficking, the pedophilia networks, the dark occult religion, the anti-life Luciferian practices. We're witnessing all of that tied into the biolaboratories, the worldwide warfare situation with the money, the worldwide warfare situation with the actual kinetic assets that are having to be moved, located, and destroyed. The Clinton Foundation and the U.S. government corruption and how that corruption sort of cascades, at every level. We're witnessing President Trump giving very powerful speeches, right? Just recently, he came out in North Carolina and said that Hillary's no longer a problem or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like that. So we're winning the information in the narrative war. We are awakening the world. And it's just incredible to watch it, move into UFOs, extraterrestrial life, what I believe to be just other terrestrial life. These very salacious topics that have been hidden in obscurity and have been sort of fantasized away. We've been inoculated against them in the sense that we were told they were fiction when they're not fiction. We were sort of gaslit in our modern culture and our entertainment, the various information outlets, the media that we've consumed in the last 50 to 75 years, especially here in the United States of America. We're watching incredible changes happen to the narrative space, and that is changing the consciousness of our world, and we're living it in real time. So, Patriots, I know it's been a long file today. It's been a while since we've gotten together. A lot has happened in the world, and a lot will continue to happen and accelerate even further. We have Operation Sandman coming together in the form of the Russian Economic Summit that is happening actually this week. We know that this week has some interesting key days. In a couple of days will be President Trump's birthday. He'll be 77. It is worth highlighting that June the 22nd is the anniversary of Operation Barbarossa, the Nazi operation to really destroy the land and the territories of the Russian Federation back in World War II, June the 22nd of, I believe it was 1941. And so at the same time that is occurring, we have the Lloyd Brunson Supreme Court case, or the Brunson Brothers Supreme Court case, dealing again with imminent threat to national emergency. It was given a conference date to be discussed by the justices the last day of the summer session, which is on June the 22nd. And it was classed there as a Rule 11, meaning of imperative public importance. So as we go through this process, as we look at things coalescing, I don't think that we have long to wait in the wings for things to get very exciting. And after things get very exciting, we're sort of going to be rolling along original moment, original moment, original moment by original moment. I want to highlight to all of you out there as we go through this process in the coming weeks and months, and we see the world change and become, I should say, start becoming the sort of earth, the sort of world, the sort of public understanding that we all want to have. As we witness this process, we have to remember to be slow to our reactive cortex, slow to our emotional judgment, our emotional assessment of things, and certainly our just general reactivity, right? It's going to be very important that we isolate the truth from what is being presented. Now, of course, if we have an emergency alert system being handled by the U.S. military, that's sort of a scenario I think that we could say reliably is well founded just on, just on its face. But if we still have the lying fake news media at any level, bringing things into the forefront, bringing things into play, we have to look at that with skepticism and remember what might be actually occurring, what might actually be happening out there in the world. When 9/11 2001 occurred in the United States of America, the entire country believed that it was legitimately under attack. 22 years later, or nearly 22 years later at this point, here we all are, both in the United States and around the world, understanding that a great deal of that attack was completely cinematically generated and not even real. But the effects of what happened that day were absolutely real because it was not a fake attack. It was a false flag. It was something that occurred for reasons other than the official reasons that were given. But lives were lost. Destruction happened. Our country was attacked that day, but not by the enemy that we were told. And so as we go through this process, should we see something dramatic like that at a national level? Should we see something like that being pushed by the lying fake news prostitutes? Should we see something like that enter into the narrative space? We really have to step back and appreciate where is it coming from? What are the corroborative bases or bases that are being used, the basis or bases that are being used to present this particular case? And what can we find out about it if we have access to things like internet, communications, etc., those sorts of electronic accesses that we have in the information age. So, all of that being said, I sincerely hope every one of you out there has a wonderful evening and a beautiful week and a beautiful day. And remember where we are. We are changing the world. We are inside the collapse. We are in the storm, if we want to call it that. The storm is not just coming, it's already here. It's just going to get more intense and I think more favorable for we the people as we see it through all of the way to the end. We have absolutely incredible things in play. There has been a ball called, if we will. There's a military term, Roger Ball, called Good and Green, and that's where we are. We are very much at a precipice moment, I think, in many respects. I think that precipice moment is going to get even more intense and knife-edged before it's over, right? We still have to witness the banking system come down and the restructuring attempt at that. We still have to witness, Q tells us that there's a communication blackout coming at some point along in this journey, and that it's going to coincide with information coming out into the public space pertaining to Hussein Obama, which I believe is likely to come out with the same corruption as the Biden crime family, the Clinton crime family. It's sort of all of the same entity, right? And isn't it fascinating that RICO law is being talked about as it pertains to these Trump charges that we've seen recently? And RICO is exactly what we would want to see applied as we move forward, because it sort of shows us at a civilian law level, by the rule of law, what organized transnational criminality is capable of, what it looks like, and how we're really supposed to prosecute that. It's not just a public threat, right, in the traditional prosecution of criminality, but it is a threat to society. It is a threat to national security. It is a threat, I think, in many respects to the constitutional republic of the United States. So RICO has a special place in all of this, and it's fascinating that we're seeing that come out to play. So all of that being said, my dear friends and Patriots all over the world, I so appreciate your time today. Again, it has been a longer file, but we'll try not to go so long in between this time. life happens, right? Life happens with all of us. And that's the beautiful part about this journey, is that we still get to wake up and hear the squeal of the little ones, and the, the morning breath from our lovely spouse. And um, we go to the routines that have always known, or that many of us have known for a long time, but we have a new understanding. We have a new lease on life. And so every day is sort of like being a child again, except we have the adult responsibilities and the adult fears and the tribulations and the worries that we also have to field. Whereas when we're little ones, we don't have those. Um, but it is truly a beautiful time to be alive. It's a demanding time. It's a time that requires flexibility. It's a time that certainly requires some openness, some expansion of our mind, some expansion of our heart, and some trust. We have to put some trust in humanity again, not to do things for us. Really, even a better way of saying it is to trust in ourselves, to be able to carry forth these things that we want to see changed and brought about in the world, right? To trust in ourselves that we can handle anything that comes our way, to sort of have a basic courtesy of understanding that at the end of the day, if we wish no ill will, and if we seek no gain with harm in our negotiations and our discussions and our workings and our musings and our sifting and our sorting with one another, we're sort of trusting that it will all work out. And it's an exercise in humanity that we've never really seen before. It's truly a great awakening in that sense. We are all becoming better people, and even the sleepers. The sleepers are beginning to realize, many of them, as many of you are aware, have finally begun to realize, certainly in their private time, but even across the dinner table, or out to dinner, or out to eat, or at the soccer game, that things really aren't quite right, and that maybe their point of view is a little incomplete. To break through that mold of human ego and human pride, that what some of us would call the sin nature, right, of man, that propensity to be to operate outside of the influence of that higher spirit, that Holy Spirit. That's a point of growth and expectation that many of the sleepers are beginning to come around to and transcend through and deal with. And that's a difficult process, but it's wonderful to see, because we're all growing together and sort of expanding and elevating ourselves as we move through life with one another. So everyone, I hope that you have a great evening, and I'm going to sign off a little bit. We were going to talk about a little bit of homework, or not homework, housekeeping on this end, but I think it'd be better for me to just make a short statement video on that. It'll take just a few minutes, and it's getting late on this end, and I certainly don't want to waste any of your time either. I'm very grateful that you're still here. I look forward to being with each of you again soon. It is turning into a wild, crazy, incredible, fun, terrifying, extraordinary ride. And I'm elated to be on it with all of you. Be safe, everyone. I'll be back with each of you again soon. This is SG Anon. Thanks. Bye-bye.